UFC 302 Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier has just taken place, and in this video I'll be giving you a recap of every single fight on the card and all the best moments on the card. Kicking it off with the first fight, Mitch Raposo versus Andre Lima. Now, first and foremost, Lima looked huge in comparison to Raposo in this fight. Raposo looked like a flyweight and Lima looked like a bantamweight edging on featherweight. Honestly, like, they looked like they were in completely different weight classes, and it was pretty evident from the power, especially with the leg kicks of Lima. Lima's leg kicks were just destroying Raposo's front legs whenever he was having to switch stance, whichever leg it was just getting torn apart. And when it came to my predictions, it's frustrating because I just feel like Raposo could have done so much more, even when it came to that weight advantage. He is comfortable with switching stance. I've seen that through Dana White's Contender Series and through the regional scene, because he's just very nice with his boxing. He's got very clean boxing, and most of all, which was the most important part of this fight for him, is his takedowns. His takedowns are good. He's a good wrestler, but he was so complacent in the fight. He was on the back foot pretty much the whole entire fight, and I think he was concerned about shooting in for the takedown, because I think there was a bit of a tell from Lima. He was pretty much getting ready to shoot a knee up, or he was getting ready to flick a kick out, and that was picked up by the commentary team as well. So I think that's where Mitch Raposo was getting a little bit complacent, a little bit probably scared about actually going for the entry in case he was going to get clipped on the way in. And it sucks, but honestly, by the time it came to that second to third round, that is the weapon that he needed. The fact that he didn't use that is the reason why he lost that fight. And honestly, Lima, as much as Lima actually did have a good fight, he should have had a point deducted. I don't know why Herb Dean was so hesitant on it. If you look in there, I believe it was the second round, Lima had a groin strike, an eye poke, and a fence grab all in the one round. Did not get, he got a minor warning, no point deduction, a minor warning. And the minor warning came pretty much as of the fence grab, which was the last thing to happen. And that, like, bearing in mind, all these fouls are happening and he's weighed in 4 pounds over the weight limit, which is a complete disadvantage to Raposo as well, especially against against an accurate kickboxer that can generate that power like Lima. Raposo is just at a complete disadvantage in this fight, and it's definitely frustrating with all those aspects. But even going with Raposo in my predictions, coming to the judges, I don't know what that split decision was about. Lima did win that fight unanimously. Honestly, we'll get more into it in this card. The judges have just been shocking, and it's just, yeah, I mean, honestly, I just don't know what the goal is in terms of these fights, especially when we get into the main card. Oh, sorry, the main card, but the co-main event, which we will get into. But yeah, ultimately, regardless, the composure and power of Lima was definitely impressive. And I do think that he will be looking like a problem moving forward, either in the flyweight or, if these weight misses keep happening, the bantamweight division. Moving up to Ailin Perez versus Joselyne Edwards. Now, this fight was pretty scrappy. There wasn't really a lot of high fight IQ plays. I mean, they were canceling each other out a bit, like, especially with the reversals. It was reversal after reversal after reversal. They just kept switching each other. They kept sweeping. It was just, there was barely any top control for an extended amount of time from either of them, really. But if you're going to give it to someone, it's Ailin. And as I said in the predictions, the reason for that is her strength overall. She has the better transitions on the ground overall. When it came to that ground game and when she had the chance, she was doing the better job of actually transitioning successfully, and she was able to get full mount a couple of times. And again, in this fight, like the last one, the fouls just aren't being pulled up. Joselyne Edwards in the second round, intentional headbutt. I'm not sure if Ailin was just playing it on, but she looked pretty stunned by it. I thought she actually might have cracked her orbital or something like that through, like when it happened. She was grabbing her like the orbital bone for quite a while. I'm not sure if it was just acting on, but overall, I mean, Ailin came back from it very strong. She hit her with a really nice spinning back fist, and I would say that she did take the second round on damage. But overall, when it came to that damage and the significant strikes, overall, I would say that Ailin Perez did take it overall with that damage, but it was a pretty lackluster fight overall. Moving up to Gall versus Bassil Hafez. Definitely one of the best fights of the night, and honestly, it's super impressive. Gall's chin held up so well, especially through that first round, especially against Hafez, who, when you look through back at his other fights, I mean, he just used a lot of stamina in that first round to land bombs, and he was landing bombs in this fight. And Gall was just maintained his composure extremely well. And bear in mind, this is him coming off 2-year layoff, getting folded like a lawn chair by Mike Malott as well. Like Gall, he was so composed. His striking was very clean as well. It's definitely improved. But I could see how Hafez could have won through the relentless pressure he did have and the takedowns. And I did have him in my predictions. But honestly, I think that Gall's striking accuracy and his big shots through especially the second and the third round, I think that it should have got him the 29-28 win. But ultimately, I mean, it was definitely up there to be close for contention with fight of the night. So it was a great fight with amazing pace. So yeah, I don't think there's much to complain about here, but I do think that Gall probably should have won this one. Moving on to Rowe versus Jake Matthews. This fight was pretty much almost entirely just a boxing fight with takedowns mixed in there here and there. But on the feet, in that boxing exchange, Matthews was just doing such a good job of closing that distance. And as I said in the predictions, Rowe just isn't that great on the back foot. And Matthews doubled his output and he had most of the success in the ground transitions when they were both on the ground. I think that Phil just needed to pressure forward more, but that complacency and pacing issue that he has is just a killer. And until he works on that, I think he's just going to struggle, especially going against a lot of these experienced fighters like Jake Matthews, and then obviously fighters anywhere near close to the top 15. So overall, a great comeback win for Jake Matthews after losing to Michael Moraes. Moving up to Grant Dawson versus Joe Solecki. Now, there's not a whole lot to really say on this one aside from Grant Dawson's wrestling. He was so dominant in the wrestling department. When it came to that first round, Solecki, he was able to get a few decent transitions off. But after that, Dawson just pretty much took over completely. I think that, yeah, you could just see that there was a pretty heavy skill difference in this fight, just transitionally, and yeah, utilizing that wrestling pedigree that Grant Dawson has compared to the sole BJJ base that Joe Solecki has. You could just seriously see that difference there when Dawson had that top control. And I think this is just a fantastic win for Dawson's confidence, in all honesty. But I think he needs a fight that is going to give him a good test on the feet, especially after the Bobby Green loss. And when you look at this, I mean, he landed 5 times the amount of shots. However, 100 of them were through ground and pound from dominant positions that he was working through transitionally. So we really need to see more from him in that stand-up and someone that's actually going to be a stand-up threat if he wants to make any moves into that top 15 and actually stay there. But yeah, overall, a great confidence booster for Grant Dawson. Moving up to Jailton Almeida versus Alexandr Romanov. Again, not much to say in this one either, but I bet the UFC is seriously regretting switching this with the Price and Morono fight. As I said in the predictions, whoever was the first one to take the other ones back would get the win in this fight. And as I said, Almeida's speed and his movement overall, especially through the transitions, was just way too much for Romanov, especially as soon as he got the back. And if possible, I think I would like to see Romanov try and cut down to light heavyweight. He's got a lot of loose fat on him, and I think his raw strength and lack of actual wrestlers and submission artists in the light heavyweight division would play pretty heavily into his favor. So I think that should be an option for him, and it's still an option for Jailton Almeida as well. But with Jailton now having momentum back on his side again in the heavyweight division, obviously he's probably just going to continue to move on through there. But regardless, still a very, very good win for Jailton Almeida. Moving on to the feature prelim, Cesar Almeida versus Roman Kopylov. This fight did not fail to deliver, honestly. Aside from the finish, it was super competitive on the feet. And with Almeida's kickboxing and Kopylov's boxing, it was just like, honestly, you were just waiting for someone to just get flatlined. But as I said in the predictions, the threat of the takedown and using feints I think that actually just completely won the fight for Kopylov, without a doubt. I mean, he had over 8 minutes of control time, and I was more so looking at the feints to actually land something clean. But I mean, he was landing clean anyway, but I mean, he was able to get the takedowns a lot easier than I thought. And I guess that's where that Sambo background was really a game changer for him. And Almeida does have pretty decent takedown defense, but I think that offensive threat of Kopylov on the feet allowed his takedowns to succeed a lot easier. And I think that this should have honestly just been a unanimous decision for Kopylov, not a split decision. Again, stupid judging. But yeah, honestly, it's a great win for him, and I think that will get him right back in that top 15 contender fight position next. Moving on to the main card, Randy Brown versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Now, if any fight was going to go to a split decision, I would have thought it would have been this one. As I said in the predictions, honestly, this fight was extremely close, and it panned out that way completely. You look at Randy Brown, he was the one that was more active on the feet. He outlanded him on the feet, especially when he was headhunting. He was doing the exact right thing. He was utilizing that reach, those straight shots, to make sure that Dos Santos was out of that boxing range, or at least to make Randy Brown get out of the boxing range to make sure he was safe, because obviously that boxing for Dos Santos is the most dangerous part of his game. But also with Dos Santos, I mean, he was so dominant on the ground with that control time. He had over 5 minutes of control time, and overall, between the two of them, I mean, it was a super competitive fight. But even though I had Dos Santos, I mean, you got to look at that. You got to look at that judging criteria. And you got to look at damage over control. So I can see how Randy Brown did take this fight. I mean, he landed a very flush knee. I believe it was in the first or the second round. And yeah, he was landing the better shots overall, to be honest. But you got to give a huge respect to Dos Santos. At 37 years old, being able to keep this fight so competitive. And I mean, you look at the fighters that he's fought as well. I mean, he's fought Renate to a draw, and he beat Benoit Saint Denis, and this is all while he's past his prime age. So yeah, just fantastic, and a great lot of respect for him. And for Randy Brown, I think that it's time for a top 15 fight for him, to be honest. Now, moving on to Niko Price versus Alex Morono. Now, this one, I don't know why, but it just proved that this should not have been on the main card. Honestly, I think it was an extremely boring fight. Alex Morono looked like the fight was taking place at the peak of Mount Everest. He was so gassed pretty much instantly. He looked so sloppy, and I think he had the worst performance on the whole entire card. He was nowhere near as technical as he usually is, and he was getting lit up with combinations from Niko Price. Niko Price was just handling him in the top position as well. He got all of his takedowns secured, 5 out of 5, and I don't know what it is with Alex Morono. I mean, he looked like there was no technical capability there whatsoever. But not to take away from Niko, I just have no idea what was going on with Alex Morono. He's definitely better than that. He just looked terrible on the fight card. I don't know why. But when you look at Niko, I mean, he kept the forward pressure. He outstruck him and outgrappled him. And I think it is a pretty decent win for Price, but this should have been nowhere near the main card. Moving up to Kevin Holland versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. Now, for how long this fight was, we actually did have a lot that actually happened in the minute and 34 seconds that we did get. And firstly, you got to give respect to Michal. Honestly, I thought he was going to be the first one to actually KO Kevin Holland. The way Kevin Holland dropped, I honestly thought he was done. I thought he dropped pretty hard, but Holland recovered very well. But yeah, he was leaving his hands low and he looked pretty complacent, just circling around. And yeah, Oleksiejczuk capitalized perfectly on him, but the issue came when it came to the ground and pound. When Oleksiejczuk followed him down for the ground and pound, he left his arm in the guard of Kevin Holland for way too long. And then as soon as Kevin Holland was able to shift, armbar was locked in straight away. And it was sitting there all day for him. And Holland, yeah, he did a great job of staying composed on the ground after he got tagged, which I don't know how it's not counted as a knockdown, as you can see on the screen, because I do take these statistics, and for some reason the official statistics don't state that it actually was a knockdown, but I don't know why, honestly. It's similar to the Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway. Gaethje knocked Max Holloway down, and it makes no sense as to why he didn't. Even Max Holloway said that he got knocked down by Justin Gaethje. So yeah, it's, I don't know, weird in that sense. But anyway, I do honestly have no idea how Michal did not tap to that armbar. The moment Holland tucked the arm under to get more leverage, I thought he was going to rip his arm off. But yeah, respect to Michal, he hung in there. But honestly, with what we have seen from him and his submission defense and his just overall grappling IQ, as soon as that was locked in and Kevin shifted, like, he was done. It was honestly, that fight was finished. And as I predicted, I did think Kevin Holland was going to get that submission win. And yeah, he did a fantastic job of adapting properly and composing himself after getting knocked down. So yeah, it was a very, very good finish from Kevin Holland. And I think when it comes to Michal, you need to give him someone that isn't like a top 15 killer or someone that's just flying through the rankings like KO Baralho. And I think he just needs someone that's, just sitting outside the rankings, that's been sitting there for a bit, to just get some momentum back and to work on that ground game as well. And when it comes to Holland, he does seem pretty happy at middleweight. I mean, especially when you look through the embedded series and everything, is like pretty much the Holland, every single segment of him was saying that he was just happy he didn't have to cut weight. So it's going to be interesting to see if he does cut back down to welterweight. But it's very hard to see what Kevin Holland's going to do next, because similar to like Amanda Ribas and Jessica Andrade, Kevin Holland just shifts between two divisions all the time. So it's very hard to see where he's going to go next. But regardless, it was a great finish coming back from that Michael Venom Page loss. Moving on to the co-main event, Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. Okay, before we get into this fight, Dave Torelli needs to be sacked. I don't know how on earth you give Costa the first 4 rounds of that fight. If anything, he may have taken the 5th round for a 49-46 just out of his volume. I'm pretty positive he outlanded Sean Strickland in the last round, but Sean Strickland landed the better shots anyway. So I think at maximum you give Paulo Costa a 49-46, but you give Costa a 49-46 that's in Sean's favor. You give him 1 round maximum. Sean, honestly, I think he had a clean sweep, 50-45. Aside from a few nice body shots and leg kicks from Costa, I think Strickland had an absolutely flawless performance. He utilized the right game plan perfectly, especially with the teep kicks to the body. And he was using those teep kicks from the start of the fight, and that was to wear down Paulo Costa's gas tank, because as we know, he's more of a brawler style with a high volume output. So it's very important to try and nullify that gas tank as much as possible to take away that KO threat that he has. And yeah, Sean Strickland did a fantastic job of that. He cut down Costa's gas tank completely and kept him on the back foot pretty much the entire fight. And surprisingly, which I didn't actually realize would actually be the case, I mean, he looked a lot bigger than Costa as well. I'm not sure if that's just because of his upright stance, like that Philly shell boxing stance that he has, but he just naturally looked a bit bigger than Costa. I'm not sure if Costa just looks smaller because of the weight cut, but it was, there's not really much to that. It was just weird to see. But yeah, Costa, when you look at him, I mean, he couldn't land anything effectively aside from, a few leg kicks here and there, which Strickland pretty much started to check to the point where, I mean, you could see, I think it was in the third round, Costa was limping a little bit. He was struggling to stand. He skipped a few times because of that checked leg kick. And I feel that through the whole entire fight with Costa, he just didn't have that killer intent, which he has shown before, especially in his fight with Yoel Romero. And I think it was just clear as day that he just didn't have that intent there. I mean, you look through the press conference, embedded, he was showing so much respect to Strickland. And I'm not sure if that's just like a psychological tell in this fight, but he was so passive. He was so passive in the fight. I don't even know if he was on the front foot for 30 seconds in 25 minutes, honestly. Like he was just so complacent, and he played into Strickland's game completely. And I think Strickland just walked away with a completely dominant decision overall, and it's really hard to argue against the title for Strickland with a performance like that. Moving on to the main event, Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. Honestly, you have to give it to both of them. It was an extremely competitive fight, which is a credit to Dustin, honestly. Being that heavy of an underdog, which honestly, the spread never should have been that wide. I think it should have been around $3. Not $4 to $5, and I think that was just honestly disrespectful to Dustin, especially now looking at the performance he put on in this fight. When it comes to this fight, I mean, one of the things we have to emphasize the most is the damage. There was so much damage in this fight. I mean, Islam seemed to have gotten hurt pretty much straight away. Like after he secured the first takedown, if you go back and look in that first round, he secured the takedown. He was in top control, and he was grimacing for like a good 5 seconds. But when he got up, so he was obviously in that position until the second round, and when he got back and went to the stool, he seemed pretty much fine. He didn't seem like there was any issues there or anything. I'm not sure if he might have had like a partial dislocation and then it popped back in or anything like that. I thought it might have been a rib, but yeah, he seemed fine after that. But then on Dustin's side, man, busted nose from a clinch knee, which is exactly why I said Islam would get the better of those clinch exchanges. I mean, it's just those knees, man. Like, he landed them on Volk, and I honestly did think he was going to land them on Poirier as well. But Poirier was landing nice body shots in the clinch, especially against the cage. But yeah, the busted nose, like, I think Dustin's nose got broken completely. Like, the way it, like, went crooked, like, I mean, more than it already is, but the way it went crooked, and the way he stumbled back, and he was struggling to breathe out of it. When they were on the ground in a, I think it was when Islam was in top control, Dustin was literally holding his nose up. I think he was just trying to find a passageway to breathe, because I think his throat was getting closed off. And yeah, I mean, just emphasizing that damage, honestly. Like, then you look more into Dustin's damage, and then he got his eye cut, which, like, I think it was in the third round, he was rubbing his eye like crazy. And I think that it was obviously from a strike, but I think it was from the edge of the glove that caught him. And I think it has something to do with the new gloves, because Strickland said in an interview that the way they are designed, it's easier to get cut by them, because I think of the thread and the way it's stitched. And so I think that possibly could have been it. But I think the way that he was rubbing, I was worried that it was like his eye was like fully cut or something. And then after that, he had issues with his knee. After he got taken down by Islam, he looked at his corner and said there was something wrong with his knee, which he pointed out to Joe Rogan. But he just seemed like in his post-fight speech, he just didn't want to be making any form of excuses or anything like that, and he didn't want to talk about it, which is fair enough. So honestly, with all that adversity, he put it on Islam on the feet. And I mean, he put more so on the damage. He put a bloody knife wound in the middle of Islam's skull. Like that the slit across his head. I've never seen Islam bleed. I mean, Volkanovski busted him up a bit, but he didn't even really bleed. It was just grazes. But there was blood everywhere. I mean, as soon as that happened from Dustin's elbow, and they got in a clinch, Dustin's, if you look back at it, when they're against the cage, just after Dustin's elbowed him and then they reverse positions, and then Dustin's against the cage, and Islam's trying to go for the takedowns, holding him against the cage. The blood was trickling down, and it was trickling all over Dustin's foot. And as soon as they released from the exchange, you look at Dustin's foot, it's completely red. There's just blood everywhere. And yeah, I mean, it just plays more into the war factor of this and why this honestly deserves fight of the night. But ultimately, I would say that the best part by far for Dustin, which the next opponents of Islam, I think, are definitely going to be honing in on this, is the takedown defense. Islam had 11 out of the 16 of his takedowns stuffed in that fight. And aside from that ankle pick at the end, he was pretty much having to resort to entirely to boxing, which was giving Dustin great opportunities to land even more damage. Because obviously in that boxing range, Dustin's he really does have that advantage. But not taking anything away from Islam. Islam does have fantastic boxing, even better kickboxing. And he was landing a lot of nice like double jabs and then a two. But I mean, honestly, the takedown defense from Dustin Poirier was extremely impressive, considering how much damage he had taken as well. But going to Islam, honestly, with that ankle pick, and at the end, like that ankle pick at the end, like that was just a fantastic adaptation to Islam's game. And he just did a fantastic job of transitioning to the back and securing that Darce choke, which was... Honestly, that Darce choke was so tight. If you look at Dustin's face, his face was pretty much instantly going purple. And honestly, going through that fight up until that point where he got choked out, I honestly thought we were getting a decision out of this. And I mean, with the shitty judging that we've had throughout this whole entire card, Poirier could have actually won. But I wouldn't be mad if Dustin Poirier won, obviously, but it's down to being fair from the judge's point of view. But I did have it 49-46 overall for Islam, and I think Dustin would have taken the fourth round. There was argument there he could have taken the second round, but yeah, overall, Islam did a fantastic job, and it's just a fantastic fight for both of their legacies regardless. Moving on to our fight card awards, kicking it off with the fighter to watch, I'm giving it to Andre Lima. Even though Lima cheated throughout the whole entire second round and missed weight, it is hard to take away from how composed and selective he was with his shots at kickboxing range. So it will be interesting, though, to see how he does fare against a dominant seasoned wrestler who actually wants to commit to the entries. And it'll be fascinating to see how far that composed striking can actually take him through flyweight or bantamweight if he keeps missing weight. But he looks massive in flyweight. I mean, so I think that he will move up to bantamweight at some point, especially obviously if he is missing that weight, which I think could be better for his style, as he doesn't... Andre Lima, when you look at him fight, he doesn't rely so much on movement and speed like other flyweights do. He relies more on technical pinpoint striking, which I think would just fare better at bantamweight. And moving on to finish of the night, got to give it to Kevin Holland. Now, with the help of Michal's pain threshold and him probably being okay with having his whole entire arm ripped off, it was an absolutely brutal armbar finish from Kevin Holland. And not only that, I mean, Holland's improvisation and his adaptability in that sequence, that just shows why he's such, shows that he's such a seasoned fighter and he's just a veteran in the MMA space. And as he said, I mean, he is probably one of the best, if not the best, gatekeepers in the UFC. And it's pretty fascinating to see someone actually say that about themselves. People usually think it's an insult, but, you know, Kevin Holland is a different breed. So, ultimately, he, especially after getting tagged, I mean, after getting dropped on his ass, and then transitioning to that and adapting to that, it was extremely impressive, and I think he definitely deserves to finish of the night. Now, moving on to the best fight card moments, in third place, to continue on, I am giving it to Holland's armbar. And honestly, pretty much everything I have said previously, and also the fact that it does have stakes there as well. I mean, it's keeping himself in the top 15 in middleweight at least, and it is redeeming that Michael Venom Page loss with a dominant finish. And on to our second best moment of the card. Islam versus Poirier, just every fight moment, really. It's pretty much a no-brainer that it was fight of the night. I mean, almost 300 strikes between them. It's got the extremely high stakes in there, and they both left it all out there and closed off the whole entire card with a fantastic fight and a fantastic finish. Overall, both of them should be extremely proud of themselves and their performances. I mean, it's fantastic for both of their legacies, as I mentioned before. And when you look at their performances, I mean, you look especially with Dustin Poirier's defense and then Islam's adaptability to get the finish. And honestly, this was hard not to put at first place, especially when you got, you know, the blood everywhere, the full MMA display, you know, them putting their heads together at the end of like the second round, you know, to get the crowd really amped up. And then, you know, them going from that to showing respect to each other at the end. And then, of course, the possibility of Dustin having his final fight in MMA. And moving on to the number one moment of the card, which I do have to leave it on a sour note. It is Strickland's split decision issue. It's annoying, but, you know, like, you look at this, Dave Torelli needs to be fired. Like, it's just insane how someone whose entire job is to effectively and accurately judge a fight off of specific criteria and can then get it completely wrong and completely different to the other judges' decisions. Like, these decisions can not only affect the outcome of the fight, but it can impact a fighter's entire career. It can send fighters spiraling. You know, if you've got fighters that are going through 12-week training camps to then going into one of the biggest fights of their lives and then getting robbed, that can completely deflate and deter them. So it seriously, and that's in the hands of just one person that, you know, most likely has never even stepped in the cage. You know, if they've got a job like that, that's a huge issue. And it seriously needs to change, which I will get into in a separate video. However, that aside, UFC 302 was a great card with great matchups. And if you haven't already, go check out my Mythical Matchups video linked on the screen here, where I break down who would win out of a prime Rashad Evans and a prime Shogun Rua. And if you enjoy the content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.